back. This is what I would really like to discuss now. So how did you take your first steps towards your venture? If you're able to, describe that in bit detail, and so that people who are listening to us, they know that if they want to bounce back in any area of their life, what are the steps that they can take?
Yeah, so I'll share that story, and I appreciate that you have more reverence for the struggles and the challenges than you do for the success. Because we have this simple formula at NLU, at the 4 S's. It's sacrifice, struggle, suffer, and then success. And if you want level 10 success, you're going to have to sacrifice at level 10, struggle at level 10, and suffer at level 10. And one thing that I will say, I'll tell this quick story. I was a little kid and we were at Point Sebago, is this lake up in Maine. And this is when my stepdad was around, but I remember my sister, she was 3 years older, and I was competing with her who could bring home the most first place ribbons, because they had all these activities. They had basketball, and they had tennis, and they had running, and they had all these activities. One of the activities was you had to run an 800 meter around the lake, this little side lake. It's not actually Point Sebago. Point Sebago's huge, but on the beach. And if you've ever run on the beach, it's like ridiculously challenging. And it was in the hot sun and I was just a little kid. I think I was probably like 11 or something like that. And there was no age groups, because this was just a fun activity at Point Sebago for people on vacation.
Right.
And I was running against teenagers. And so I'm a very competitive guy, and I won, right? I beat everybody by a pretty significant margin. And my mom asked me, she's like, I don't get it. Like, you never run. How did you beat all those other kids? And I was just a kid at the time, and now I get it, right? I said, Mom, I can suffer more than all those other kids. And the reason I tell that story is because I think resilience has always come naturally to me, because I grew up in such a challenging environment. And for someone who didn't grow up, didn't lose their father at 2, and didn't have a stepdad, and didn't have some of the challenges that I grew up in, resilience might not come as naturally. And it's important to understand resilience and the part that it plays. So I've had some really dark moments in my life, but I always found a way to come out of them a better man, and holistically too. So to answer your original question, what are some tips that I have, and what was my early venture? So when I was making all that money in corporate and I got in that car accident, after that I quit corporate and I started my own venture, and it was called Alan Lazarus LLC. And I wanted to be a speaker and a podcaster. I started a podcast called Conversations Change Lives, because I was looking at my life and I was like, okay, what made the difference? Like, why is it that I was so successful and so many other people aren't successful? What made the difference? And it was I always had these deep conversations with incredibly intelligent people. And I was always asking questions and studying. I used to get made fun of a lot in high school for asking dumb questions, right? So it was deep conversation. So I had a slogan. It was called "What You'll Never Learn in School, but Desperately Need to Know." And desperately was in all caps. And now it's obvious, but that's not a good slogan if you're trying to go into high schools and colleges and speak, right? So anyways, I had a podcast called Conversations Change Lives. And my first guest on the show was Kevin Palmieri, who's now my co-host. And he had a show called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And I was the first guest on his show. We were hosting a collaboration called the Hyperconscious Podcast meets Conversations Change Lives podcast, which is a terrible title. So eventually we just went all in on the Hyperconscious Podcast. And then 350 episodes later, we rebranded to what is now Next Level University. And it's holistic self-improvement in your pocket from anywhere on the planet every single day. We do an episode every day. It didn't start there, right? Now we're actually listened to in over 120 countries, which is amazing. 14-person team. I have 20 clients all over the world, different industries, different backgrounds, business clients, all that. And that's all great. Okay, seriously. But I'll never forget landscaping on the side for 4 hours in the hot sun when I didn't have money. See, it's really cool now for Kevin and I to say that our first studio was in my sister's old bedroom and that our second studio was in my mother's basement. See, that's really cool now, but at the time it did not feel cool. But I just never lost sight of, if we work hard enough and we work long enough and we add enough value to enough people, and help them improve the quality of their lives, we will succeed. And I told Kevin, I said, we will succeed. We will. And now, I mean, it's awesome because we're succeeding at a high level, and we haven't pumped the brakes at all on the work ethic side. But the reason I'm saying this is, I think, to go back to my original point, is resilience. I think we want to believe that we don't have to suffer. And I just don't believe that. I really don't. And people who do have a pleasure-centered paradigm, and they have this deep belief that life is supposed to be easy, or it's supposed to be fun, or it's supposed to be enjoyable, I think it messes with the human psyche, because life is challenging and it's supposed to be challenging. And I'll say this. My girlfriend is the hardest working person I've ever met. She's unbelievable. Okay. She just every second of every day, without any exaggeration, is just trying to get better every day. And she has her own podcast too. And we have our own little business together. But she has the right paradigm. And the paradigm is this: life is challenging. And I remember I asked her, I said, sweetheart, can you grow without challenge? And she's like, no. I'm like, okay, can you be challenged without any pain? And she said, no. I said, why is it that we're all avoiding the one thing that's the most necessary for growth? Pain. We all avoid pain. It's called a pain avoidance tendency, is what psychologists call it. If you can override that, going to the gym is painful, but it's good for you and you have to do it. So for me, I just relegate it. It's going to suck and I don't want to do it. Doesn't matter. I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to go to the gym after this. I swear to you. And unless a meteor hits my house, I'm going. Not because I want to, not because it's fun, and not because I like kale. No one does. But because it's going to benefit me in the future. And so investors relinquish current pleasure for long-term return on investment. And I'm an investor. And everyone out there, you can do the same, but suffering is a necessary part of that equation. And I think anyone who says it isn't usually is not as fulfilled as they could be, because I believe fulfillment is growth and contribution and quality of life. And the only way to actually do that is through challenges and pain and suffering.